speak and all that.
See, are we?
We will just start in exactly 2 minutes. Thank you for your patience. We will start in exactly 2 minutes. Good evening, everybody. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ವಿನಯ್ ಶ್ರೀನಿವಾಸ ಅಂತ, ನಾವು ಭಾರತೀಯರು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ. This is Vinay Srinivasa from Now Bharatiyaru, Bangalore. Now Bharatiyaru is a platform which was set up in December 2019 when the protests to save the constitution and against NPR, NRC and CAA were ongoing. Now Bharatiyaru is a platform of different Dalit, Muslim, left organizations, several individuals, women's organizations, organizations of sexual and sexuality minorities, And now Bhartiyaru has been working for the last 4-5 months, different programs to popularize the constitution, to conduct training programs for people to be aware of their rights. And in the pandemic, we've also been engaged in relief work, and we've also been engaged in organizing webinars on different issues. ನಾವು ಭಾರತೀಯರು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನಿಂದ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಸಹ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರೋಂಥ ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ. ಇದು ದಲಿತ ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳ, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳ, ಎಡಪಂಕ್ತಿಯ ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳ, ಮಹಿಳಾ ಮತ್ತು ಲೈಂಗಿಕ ಮತ್ತು ಲಿಂಗತ್ವ ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರ ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳ ಮತ್ತೆ ಪ್ರಗತಿಪರ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳ ಒಂದು ಒಕ್ಕೂಟ. ಡಿಸೆಂಬರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ವಿ. ಯಾವಾಗ NPR NRC ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಶುರು ಆಯ್ತು, ಆಗ ನಾವು ಕೆಲಸ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸಂವಿಧಾನ ಉಳಿಸಲು ಹಲವಾರು ಟ್ರೈನಿಂಗ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ಗಳು ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, ಪ್ರತಿಭಟನೆಗಳಾಗಿದೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ, ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ತರಹದ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳು ಆಗಿದೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಕೋವಿಡ್ ಸೋಂಕು ಶುರು ಆದ ನಂತರ ನಾವು ರಿಲೀಫ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಸಹ ತೊಡಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಇಶ್ಯೂಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ಗಳು ಸಹ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಇವತ್ತು ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿರೋ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ಏನಪ್ಪಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಈ ವೆಬಿನಾರ್ ಆರ್ಗನೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಟುಡೇಸ್ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ ಆನ್ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಇಸ್ ವೆರಿ ರೆಲೆವೆಂಟ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ we've been seeing the kind of Islamophobia that has been rampant, and it increased during the COVID time. And therefore, from Now Bharatiyaru, we felt that this is something that we need to address, because this is not something that we see is going to go away anytime soon. So therefore, we felt that it's important to have a discussion on this. And today's discussion will be moderated by Ayman Khan. I'm now going to hand over the session to Ayman Khan so that she can go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this very important conversation. And I would, for starters, request everybody to please switch off the video at all times, and we will be taking questions towards the end of the session, and that option will be available only via chat. And please make this easier for us, since there is a lot of issue with Zoom as of now. I'll start this conversation context in terms of what is happening at the national and international level in terms of, I'm not sure whether we term that Islamophobia or something more, but I think the conversation will take us there. What we are seeing in terms of the otherization of Muslims and a very strategic kind of systematic attack and exclusion of Muslims from all kind of spaces and in the society is not something new. This kind of otherization and terming of Muslim bodies as foreigner or as being the other, as being the impure, is not something which is new. But I'll give a little bit of context on what is happening in the second term of Modi government, of the BJP government. What has started to happen in the second term of this government especially is a very systematic exclusion through legislation, through bringing in certain laws, through bringing in certain ideas, which kind of make it, which kind of give it a lot of impunity in terms of the state gives this kind of exclusion impunity. Earlier, a lot of this we were seeing in the first term was taking a kind of different route. In the first term, largely things were happening in terms of individual Muslims were being attacked throughout the country, what we were largely calling or terming as mob lynching. And now what we are seeing is that through triple talaq legislation or through the verdict of Babri Masjid in Ayodhya, through passing the CEA, we are seeing an institutionalized kind of exclusion of Muslims. In 2019, again, what we are seeing is that after the CEA was passed, a lot of Muslims occupied public spaces in the country, which was earlier, so to say, unprecedented. It was earlier not seen in this manner. And this occupies and asserting a certain Muslim identity was was threatening the Indian state. And we have seen since 2019 of Muslims being attacked and killed. I'll give a little bit of context. In Uttar Pradesh, 23 Muslims were killed for protesting against the CEA. In Mangalore, in Karnataka, we are having this conversation here. Muslims were killed and attacked for protesting against the CAA. Outside of this, I'm also what we also saw in February was a pogrom in Delhi, which I will just quote from the Delhi Minorities Commission report on which is the only official document on the Delhi pogrom, which was carried out in February. After a series of hate speeches against Muslims to stop protesting, basically, is that basically this is a completely systematic and organized and pre-planned attack on Muslims. So much so, I'll give a small brief example. So much so that we are seeing that in terms of the shops and the houses that were attacked. A small example. Um, one house which is owned by a Muslim, one shop which is owned by a Muslim was completely burnt, but the another shop which is right very close to the same shop was owned by, rented out by a Muslim. So that shop was not burnt out, but the material inside that shop was taken out and burnt out. It was planned to that level. So another aspect I'll look at briefly, quickly, at some international things that are developing around this. The USCIRF, the United States Congress on International Religious Freedom, has rated India very poorly. It has put India as a particular concern country, which is amongst the only 14 countries in the world right now in terms of religious freedom, and especially in context of the treatment of Muslims in India. Islamophobia, so to say, with in terms of definition, one of the commonly accepted definitions of Islamophobia is that it is rooted in a racism, a kind of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. And when we say expression of Muslimness, we are also seeing a kind of similar thing. I will give two brief examples regarding that. In UP, when minors were attacked and picked up and illegally detained by the UP police, the minors who were wearing certain markers of Muslimness, they were wearing a kurta pajama, or they looked, so to say, what the state believes for what Muslims look like, were those children were attacked much more than children who were wearing, say, a jeans or t-shirt. So this kind of attack is very particular. Even in February, what we saw that among the Muslim women who were attacked in Northeast Delhi, the Muslim women who were wearing hijabs or who were wearing burqas were attacked more than other Muslim women. So these markers of Muslimness are also under attack. But in the Indian context, we also need to have a conversation. We are very limited. We have very limited time, but a little bit in terms of how we can contextualize Islamophobia in terms of Brahmanism, in terms of the caste, deeply entrenched caste system in India, which definitely should be specific to India. So I'm raising some questions which our speakers can discuss, and I also have some specific questions for our speakers. I won't take more time. I would move to our first speaker, who is Suhail KK, founder director, Quill Foundation from Kerala. And I would request Suhail to please touch upon some of these aspects in terms of when he contextualizes Islamophobia, also tells us how we can contextualize Islamophobia specifically. Do we contextualize Islamophobia specifically in terms of India? Do we do it specifically in terms of South Asia? And where is the question of caste? How do we speak about Brahmanism and the otherization that happens via Brahmanism in India specifically? Over to you, Suhail.
Yes, thank you, Ayman, and thank you for the organizers. It's a wonderful meeting that is being organized here. I see a lot of people from all walks of life, from all different.
Suhail, can you please unmute yourself? You are.
Yes, I am unmuted. Yes. Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You're not audible.
Okay. Hello, hello, hello.
There's an issue, I think.
No, there's a mic issue with him. He's unmuted. But he's not audible.
Can you please switch to earphones if that's possible, because you're not audible.
Oh,
as-
no,
Hello, 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 hello.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Can you hear
working now.
me?
Go ahead.
So yeah, thank you, Ayman, and thank you, organizers, for organizing such a wonderful meeting with the most important topic of our times, and that is Islamophobia. India is now the global epicenter of Islamophobia, and anti-Muslim sentiments, which used to be in the periphery, is now in the heart of political establishment. You have seen Corona Jihad, you have seen the propaganda of land jihad recently, the propaganda that Muslim population is exploding, propaganda of love jihad, the Tablighi Jamaat and Corona Jihad and things like that. What we need to know is that this particular thing called as the Islamophobia is actually not a very innocent kind of hate which has erupted all of a sudden without any plan. Actually, this is a political project. Even the Tablighi Jamaat Corona Jihad fiasco is a political project. You have seen the dates of the propaganda which happened, and what all conferences, how many conferences had happened throughout India, and you have seen how this particular conference of Tablighi Jamaat was one thing in the whole episode of Corona infections, and many villagers have declared to boycott Muslims as a whole. There have been incidences where Tablighi Jamaat people have been shot dead, they have been lynched, and all kinds of targeted violence associated with this. So, and now what you know is this whole, what even the statistics show, and even the mainstream media have shown us, that this whole episode of propaganda against the Tablighi Jamaat was actually a conspiratorial thing, and that has got nothing to do with the reality, is what even the mainstream media has published in the last few days. So actually what happened in the last few years is that, we have heard about computers and laptops and your mobiles being hacked. We have heard about hacking of digital devices. But what has happened recently is that human minds have been hacked. We all have heard about Yuval Noah Harari's important books, especially related to the Sapiens, the book named Sapiens, which clearly says about how the human minds have been hacked by corporates in the last few years by using various techniques in a way that they understand you than you understanding yourself. So the thing is, by using various digital techniques and gathering of mass data, what they have did was they have tried to understand about your feelings and your inner being, and then manipulate your choices and also your desires. So this is what the companies has done. Apart from that, what we have seen is through this digital revolution, through this social media revolution, the established political parties like the one that we have in our country, the BJP, they have effectively used this medium to manipulate public opinion, to misappropriate democracy. What they have done is they have created digital echo chambers wherein they manufacture fake news and fake information. People, when they hear it again and again, when they hear or see repeated lies, they tend to believe in these lies, especially when these lies are convenient for them to in general, be part of the mainstream or be part of the general psyche. They tend to accept it. So this is what is happening since the last few years in our country. Actually, Islamophobia has been mainstreamized. You may think that why is the government and the government agencies like the police department or by the by the court or the judicial bodies? Why don't they? Why are they not interested in addressing the issue? The thing is, the the Islamophobia network is so deeply entrenched. It is so deeply entrenched into the society that everyone who is part of the society is now has accepted it as the mainstream. You have heard, you have seen the news reports yesterday and day before yesterday, saying that world acclaimed musicians like A.R. Rahman and Rasul Pukuti, both of them being part of the Muslim community. Both of them are members of Muslim community, labeling them as Muslims, and then they say that we have been discriminated. They say we have been discriminated in Bollywood. They say that even we did not get jobs in the last 5 years. So completely marginalizing whoever is in the Muslim identity is the most important thing when you say about Islamophobia. So the most important question is, why do they hate us? The most important question is, why does others, or why does the especially the Indian mainstream hate Muslims? This is the most important question when it comes to the discussion on Islamophobia. After following a lot of social media discussions in closed groups and also in public pages and groups, what we can understand, what I understood is that the whole episode of Islamophobia, or the issue of Islamophobia, the cause of Islamophobia, or the content of hate can be divided into 5 different parts. You can just list as the key factors which contributes towards hate in India. So number 1 is that they believe, whoever hates Islam and Muslims, they believe that Muslims are anti-Hindu. That is propaganda number 1. That they are against us. Muslims are against Hindus. Muslims are against Christians, and so on and so forth. In India, it is basically Muslims are against Hindus. This is one of the most important propaganda that is happening. And that is why Muslims, when they are in large numbers, they tend to annihilate the Hindus. That is what happened in Kashmir, the Pandit Exodus. They use all this propaganda to give as evidences that Muslims are against Hindus. Number 2 is that Muslims are the mother of all evils, or Islam is the mother of all evils. They are inherently violent. Islam and Muslims cannot integrate into the secular and liberal societies. This is one of the most important allegations, or one of the most important mind making in this whole process of mainstreamizing Islamophobia. So one is inherently violent. They say that Muslims are bad people. They have coronavirus in them. They oppress women, and things of all those kinds. That is forms the mainstream anti-Muslim prejudice and stereotypes, negative stereotypes that we see. So this is point number 2, that Muslims are inherently violent and they are mother of all evils. Number 3 is that Muslims are traitors. They don't like this country, and they have no loyalty towards India, and that is the reason that Muslims don't say Vande Mataram. Muslims, if there is a cricket match between between India and Pakistan, Indian Muslims tend to support Pakistan, and allegations of all these kinds. Labeling of all these kinds happens in this particular head, and that is Muslims are against traitors, are basically traitors. And number 4 is the Muslim population anxiety, that they have high fertility rates, and apart from that, they convert people, and because the reason of them converting people is that they have hypnotizing powers. They have certain powers that they tend to attract people, and then they brainwash people to convert, and things like that. And apart from all this, they have the tool of love jihad, a new propaganda. So love jihad. This also contributes to population anxiety. And number 5 is Mughal history. They say that in the past, Muslim rulers have done a lot of wrong things, and the Muslims who are living at present need to have face the hate, and we will do the revenge against Muslims. These 5 important points constitutes anti-Muslim hate in India. So this is how Islamophobia is manifested in India. So how is it manifested? These things contributes to the main the factors of hate. So how is it manifested? Basically, Islamophobia is manifested in 2 broad ways. Number one is interpersonal, everyday Islamophobia, where a person or different people express anti-Muslim hatred by different ways of discriminating and attacking. And number 2 is structural Islamophobia, where government policies are turned against Muslims, or completely to annihilate them from the mainstream political subjectivity, or to completely neutralize their political subjectivity, is part of the whole political process. Structural Islamophobia. So interpersonal Islamophobia, we can categorize, we can see it manifesting in ways like discrimination in jobs, residential apartments, when they give residents permits, or when they give flats and land, when they sell properties or they rent it, they discriminate. They say that we don't give it to Muslims. Economic boycott. Boycott Halal campaign was one campaign that happened 1 month back, and it became trending in Twitter. So boycott halal is basically boycotting all Muslim products. Attack on mosques and hate crimes, targeted violence. Muslim candidates, even they are not appointed in elections as parties representative. And in structural Islamophobia, you can see the citizenship issue, the Citizenship Amendment Act. You can see the special security legislations, like the anti-terror legislations, which completely targets a particular group. Only as the same act, the same violence, or any act done by a different set of people, or different people from different community, is not charged with anti-terror law. The same act of violence or even act of thought, when done by a person in a Muslim community, they are charged with terror provisions. So this is one important structural Islamophobia that you see. And also you can see the discourse on population control based on religion and things like that. So what is Islamophobia? That is a very important question. So how do you define Islamophobia? As Ayman has clearly spelled it out, I would like to quote 2 important definitions. One is the Runnymede Foundation. Runnymede Foundation is based in Britain, and they have made it very short. A small, short definition for Islamophobia is anti-Muslim racism. So Islamophobia is anti-Muslim racism. That's it. There is a longer definition. I don't want to go into the longer definition of Runnymede Foundation. This clears all the doubts. Islamophobia is anti-Muslim racism. Be it in the West, or be it in the East, or be it anywhere in the world, it is basically anti-Muslim racism. Number 2 is All Party Parliamentary Group of Britain. What they did is they defined Islamophobia, saying that Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. So this is a book this is a report, a detailed report given by the Runnymede Foundation, basically. And also you can find the report for download, Islamophobia Defined, the inquiry into a working definition of Islamophobia. This is the all-party parliamentary document which clearly defines Islamophobia. So, how, when you say it is racism, the most important question that comes is, how is it racism? So racism is basically those things which is related to a particular ethnic group. Muslims are not from a particular ethnic group. Muslims are from different ethnicities. They are having different colors. For instance, they have white, black colors. They are Mongolian make. They are of different kinds of race, so to say. So how is Islamophobia racism? This is the most important refute that comes when you say Islamophobia is racism. Basically, this question arises from the very fact that we don't know what is racism. So we will have to understand what is racism. Racism is not basically only ethnicity. It doesn't only address the issue of your ethnic identity. It is basically any identity markers is called basically race, a race. And race is a construct. Race cannot be proved in a laboratory. So any discrimination on the basis of identity markers is racism. For instance, color is racism in Ireland and in US, for instance. Blacks are considered as inferior to the whites. And so you have all kinds of violence and discrimination against blacks. In the same way, in the history, you can find the discrimination against Jews. So Jews are not from any particular ethnic group. Jews are from, from all different parts of the world. They are in Germany, German Jews, there are Italian Jews, there are Jews from different parts of Europe, there are American Jews, there are even Indian Jews. You have Indians as Jews. So, Jews, for instance, are a race because of their religious identity marker. So religion is their race. So when you discriminate against this religious identity, then you call it as a race. And anti-Semitism is one of the classical episodes of racism that we have seen in the mid-20th century. So basically, racism is not against a particular ethnic group. It is basically against any identity markers. When you discriminate against on the basis of identity markers, it is called racism. Then the second question is, how is it phobia? Like Islamophobia, so how is it phobia? Phobia is basically fear. So how is this that they fear Islam? They don't fear Islam, they fear Muslims. This is one important refute that comes. So it is not Islamophobia, it is Muslimophobia. If we want to mention phobia, it should be Muslim phobia. And it is actually fear against Muslims. I would say that Islamophobia is a word where, when you say the technical words like this, you will not you will not dissect the words and then try to make sense of it. For instance, homophobia. Homophobia is used against those people who doesn't subscribe to the idea of different sexual identities. Like for instance, gay, lesbian identities, we say as homophobia. But when you dissect the word homo and phobia, it doesn't make any sense. Homo, a person who is fearful against his home, cannot be the meaning. Or even phobia against homosexuality cannot also be the word meaning of it. So if you dissect a word and then try to understand meaning, it is not how you define a word. A word is actually constructed by its usage. For instance, anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, if you dissect the word anti and Semitism, Semitic religions, Semitism actually doesn't represent all the religions of Semitic religions or the family of Semitic religions. It doesn't address the discrimination against Muslims and Christians, which is also a Semitic religion. Anti-Semitism only means anti-Jews. So we don't normally say that this word is not proper. This is improper word. This is proper because anti-Semitism word has been constructed by its usage. In the same way, Islamophobia, the word is constructed by its usage, and the usage and the meaning of the word is that it is discrimination. As I said, it is anti-Muslim racism. So the basic
sorry, because there has to be a translation also in Kannada. So you have 2 more minutes to wrap up your.
Okay, yeah. Ayman, yes. Okay. I would like to just mention what is a solution to Islamophobia. So when you say the problem, there should be a solution. So I would say that there is only a 4-step solution to this. Number 1, you define Islamophobia. Number 2, you document Islamophobia, a structured documentation and recording of all different manifestations of Islamophobia. Number 3 is deconstructing Islamophobia and its narratives. Number 4 is reconstruction of new positive and realistic narratives around Muslims. So these are the 4 important step approaches that we will have to, as a community or as a people. First of all, you don't need to be a Muslim to address or to voice against Islamophobia. Islamophobia is racism, and you have to say racism is wrong. You need to be a black to voice against the discrimination against the blacks. You know, it need not be a bit to speak about or to voice against the injustice against the Dalits. So to address this particular issue. So this 4-step approach should have different phases to solve. So you will have to have multi-phase approach to address this issue. Number 1 is, of course, phase 1, which will include tracking and recording of all reported incidents of Islamophobia, which is systemic and also interpersonal. Number 2 is build a theoretical framework for Islamophobia in India. Number 3 is about audit the government policies and their impact on Muslim minorities, thereby the structural Islamophobia. So this is very important work which needs to be done. And number 4 is, inside this, is identifying the Muslim or Islamophobic hate groups through addressing the issue through advocacy efforts, different advocacy efforts. Number 5 is identifying the fueling factors of Islamophobia from within the community and formulate response. There are certain factors within the community which may contribute to Islamophobia, which fuels the fact, which acts as the fueling factors of Islamophobia. So we need to identify that as well. And number 6 is debunking the Islamic terror cases in India, which actually forms the backbone of the anti-Muslim hate in a very big way. So all these combined forms the first phase of the work. And second phase is about developing a sustainable and strategic response to Islamophobia. How do you respond and make a sustainable strategic response to it? And number 2 is about building coalitions. You build coalitions against this particular menace. And number 3 is about media advocacy, large-scale media advocacy. Number 4 is about parliamentary, movement, and international advocacy of anti-Islamophobia law, which is basically you ask for a law which curbs this particular menace. You know, there are laws which addresses racism, like for instance, anti-Semitism law, as I mentioned, which exists in Europe and also in North America. You have anti-scheduled caste, scheduled tribes. You have the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes Atrocities Act, and 4 different laws in India which addresses the specific issue of caste-based discrimination in India. So in the same way, you can ask for anti-Islamophobia law in India and also outside India, which need to be a major step forward. And number 5 is, of course, the strategic litigation. So all these forms you have phase by phase addressing the solution. So I would end my talk by just mentioning that this solution is what we want, and whoever believes in egalitarianism, who believes in social justice, whoever believes in the values of our constitution, equality, liberty, fraternity, and justice, we all need to stand up and voice together against all kinds of racism, including the racism that we see in our country, the atrocities against the Dalits. So we need to make a political solution combining all these voices together, and I think that is a step forward. If you ask me how do you place Islamophobia in Indian context, especially the caste hierarchy and the caste-based politics, I would say that this is a step forward actually to make another group of untouchables in India, and that is the Muslims. So they are trying to place Muslims in this whole hierarchy, the pyramidal hierarchy inside in India that they have made through 5,000 years or 500 centuries. And this Muslims have not been addressed in this pyramidal structure. Through Islamophobia and Islamophobic narratives, they are trying to place Muslims as avarnas, maybe to the extent of avarnas and to the extent of untouchables. this is what actually you have when you say about placing this whole issue into the caste discourse. This is what I would like to mention. And thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Suhail. I'll actually ask Vinay to quickly translate in Kannada whatever Suhail has spoken and pointed out, and we will take questions towards the end.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಸುಹೇಲ್ ಅವರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಸಂಕ್ಷಿಪ್ತವಾಗಿ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೇ ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಅವರು ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ, ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಹಿನಿಯಲ್ಲಿರೋ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮಗಳು ಸಹ ನಿಜ ಇಲ್ಲದಿರೋ ನ್ಯೂಸ್, ಏನ್ ಫೇಕ್ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಅದನ್ನು ಸಹ ಪ್ರಕಟಿಸಿ ಒಂದು ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾನ ಬೆಳೆಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇದು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಈಗ ಬಿಜೆಪಿ ಅಂತ ಪಕ್ಷಗಳು, ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಹಿನಿಯಲ್ಲಿರೋ ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಪಕ್ಷಗಳು ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಜನರ ಮನಸ್ಸನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ಟ್ರೈ ಮಾಡಿ, ಅವರ ಭಾವನೆಗಳನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ಟ್ರೈ ಮಾಡಿ, ಅದನ್ನ ಬದಲಾಯಿಸಕ್ಕೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಮ್ಯಾನಿಪುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಟ್ರೈ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಸುಹೇಲ್ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು, ನಾವು ಫೋನ್ ಹ್ಯಾಕ್ ಆಗೋದು, ಕಂಪ್ಯೂಟರ್ ಹ್ಯಾಕ್ ಆಗೋದು ಅದೆಲ್ಲ ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ. ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಮನಸ್ಸುಗಳನ್ನೇ ಹ್ಯಾಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಬಿಜೆಪಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಸಂಘ ಪರಿವಾರದವರು ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಮನಸ್ಸುಗಳನ್ನೇ ಹ್ಯಾಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ಮೀಡಿಯಾ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅವ್ರದೇ ಆದ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ಗಳನ್ನ ರಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸುಳ್ಳು ಸುದ್ದಿನ ಹಬ್ಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಅವರು ಇದು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ನೀವು ಒಂದು ಸುಳ್ಳನ್ನ 1000 ಸತಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ನಿಜ ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅನ್ಸ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಎಸ್ಪೆಷಲಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಅದು ಆ ಒಂದು ಬಿಲೀಫ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ಅದು ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಅದು ನಿಜ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಅವರು ಅದನ್ನೇ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಭಾರತ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಪೊಲೀಸು ಮತ್ತೆ ಜುಡಿಷಿಯರಿನಲ್ಲೂ ಸಹ, ನ್ಯಾಯಾಂಗ ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಯಲ್ಲೂ ಸಹ ಈ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಹಿನಿಲಿ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಬೇರ್ ಬಿಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಬೇರೆ ಯಾರನ್ನು ಸಹ ಅದನ್ನ ತಡಿಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು, ಬಾಲಿವುಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಕೇಳಿದೀವಿ, AR ರೆಹಮಾನ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ರೆಜುಲ್ ಪೂಕುಟ್ಟಿ, ಏನು ಅವರು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮ್ಯೂಸಿಕ್ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಆದ್ರೂ ಸಹ ಅವರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಕೆಲಸ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಪೇಪರ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಈ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಯಾಕೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನ ದ್ವೇಷ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಸುಹೇಲ್ ಅವರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ಅವರು ಸುಮಾರು ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಏನ್ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ 5 ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಒಂದು, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನ ಆಂಟಿ ಹಿಂದೂ ಅಂತ ಅವರು ಸುಮಾರು ಸುಳ್ಳನ್ನ ಹಬ್ಸಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಏನ್ ಹಿಂದೂಗಳ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಆದ್ರೂ ಸಹ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಹಿಂದೂಗಳ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇದ್ದಾರೋ, ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಕಾಶ್ಮೀರ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಂದೂಗಳನ್ನ ನಾಶ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಈಗ ಇವ್ರನ್ನ ನಾಶ ಮಾಡ್ದಂಗೆ, ಕಾಶ್ಮೀರಿ ಪಂಡಿತ್ಗಳನ್ನ ತೆಗೆದಂಗೆ ಅವರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಎರಡನೇದು, ಇಸ್ಲಾಮು ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಕೆಟ್ಟದ ಇಸ್ಲಾಂ ಅನ್ನೋ ನಂಬೋರು, ಅವರು ಒಳಗಡೆಯಿಂದ ಅವರು ತುಂಬಾ ಒಂದು ದ್ವೇಷ ತುಂಬಿದವರು, ಅವ್ರು ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವರು ಕ್ರೂರಿಗಳು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಸಹ ಸುಳ್ಳು ಹಬ್ಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ದೇಶದ್ರೋಹಿಗಳು, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಯಾವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಪಾಕಿಸ್ತಾನಕ್ಕೆ ಸಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಹಿಂದೂ ವಿರುದ್ಧ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಒಳಗಡೆಯಿಂದನೇ ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಕ್ರೂರಿಗಳು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ದೇಶದ್ರೋಹಿಗಳು ಅಂತೆಲ್ಲ ಸುಳ್ಳು ಹಬ್ಸಿ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾನ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ಈ ಲವ್ ಜಿಹಾದ್ನ ಸಹ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷ ಹಬ್ಬಿಸ್ತಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ 5ನೇದು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಮುಘಲ್ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಲಿ ನಡೆದಿರೋದು, ನಡೀದೇ ಇರೋದು ಎರಡು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸುಳ್ಳು ಸುದ್ದಿನೂ ಸಹ ಹಬ್ಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ಇದ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಒಂದು ಈ ಬಾಯ್ಕಾಟ್ ಹಲಾಲ್ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಇಡೀ ಕ್ಯಾಂಪೇನ್ ಒಂದು ನಡೀತು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಮಾಸ್ಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಸಹ ನಾವೇನ್ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ, ಮಾಸ್ಗಳ ಮೇಲೆ ಸಹ ಅಟ್ಯಾಕ್ ಗಳು ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ. ಇದೆಲ್ಲಾನು ಸಹ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾದ ಒಂದು ಹೇಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಾನೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವು ಈ ಪೋಟಾ, ಟಾಡಾ, UAP ಅಂತ ಕಾನೂನುಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಏನು ಟೆರರಿಸಂ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಏನು ಕಾನೂನುಗಳಿದೆ ಅದ್ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆನೆ ಸಹ ಇದ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಇದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಸುಹೇಲ್ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನೆಂದ್ರೆ, ಈ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನು, ಅದರ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯಾಖ್ಯಾನ ಏನು. ಅದರ ವ್ಯಾಖ್ಯಾನ ಹೇಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಬ್ರಿಟನ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ 2 ಡೆಫಿನೇಷನ್ ಇದೆ. ಅದು ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಇಸ್ ಆಂಟಿ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ರೇಸಿಸಂ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ರೇಸಿಸಂ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಎಥ್ನಿಕ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್, ಒಂದು ವರ್ಣ ಭೇದ ನೀತಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು ನಾವು. ಸೊ ಆ ಒಂದು ಗುಂಪಿನ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಅಂತ. ಅಥವಾ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಇಸ್ ಅ ಟೈಪ್ ಆಫ್ ರೇಸಿಸಂ ವಿಚ್ ಟಾರ್ಗೆಟ್ಸ್ ದ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿತ್ವ, ನೀವೊಂದು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಬುರ್ಕಾ ಹಾಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಒಂದು ಟೋಪಿ ಹಾಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಟಿಯ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿತ್ವದ ಒಂದು ಅದನ್ನ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ರೆಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದ್ರ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಏನ್ ದ್ವೇಷ ಹಬ್ಸ್ತಾರಲ್ಲ ಅದನ್ನು ಸಹ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಬಟ್ ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಇಸ್ಲಾಂ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನೀವು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮ್ಸ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ರೇಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಜನಾಂಗಕ್ಕೆ ಸೇರಿದವರಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಅದು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ದೇಶಗಳ ಆಗಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಮಂಗೋಲಿಯಾ ಇಂದ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ವೆಸ್ಟ್ ಏಷ್ಯಾ ಇಂದ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಭಾರತದವ್ರು ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಅದೇ ರೀತಿ ನಾವು ಜೂಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡಿದ್ರು ಸಹ ಜೂಗಳು ಜರ್ಮನಿಲಿದ್ರು, ಇಟಲಿಲಿದ್ರು, ಅಮೆರಿಕಾದಲ್ಲಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಜೂಗಳ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಇರೋ ದ್ವೇಷನೂ ಸಹ ಅದೇನು ಒಂದು ರೇಸಿಸಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದು ಜನಾಂಗದ ಮೇಲಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಒಂದು ಧರ್ಮದ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರೋದು. ಬಟ್ ಎನಿವೆ ನಾವು ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಡೆಫಿನಿಷನ್ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಒಟ್ಟಾರೆ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಗಮನಿಸಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾನ ಎದುರಿಸೋದು ಹೇಗೆ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಕೆಲವು ಅಂಶಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಡಾಕ್ಯುಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಇಂಡಿವಿಜುವಲ್ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಸಮಾಜದ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷ ಅದನ್ನ ಡಾಕ್ಯುಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಏನು ಒಂದು ವರ್ಣನೆ ಇದೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಒಂದು ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನ ಏನು, ಅದು ಹೇಗೆ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಸಂಶೋಧನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಸಂಶೋಧನೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಅನಲೈಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ನರೇಟಿವ್, ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನ ಕಟ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ನಿಜಾಂಶದ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನ ಕಟ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದೇನಂದ್ರೆ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಎದುರಿಸಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಸಂವಿಧಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ನಂಬೋರು, ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ನ್ಯಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಂಬೋರು ಯಾರಾದ್ರೂ ಸಹ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾದ ವಿರುದ್ಧವಾಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವ್ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ನೀತಿಗಳೇನಿದೆ, ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ನೀತಿಗಳಿಂದ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಸಮುದಾಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಪರಿಣಾಮ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸಹ ಗಮನಿಸಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಯಾರು ಕೆಲವು ಗುಂಪುಗಳು ನಿಂತಿರ್ತವೆ, ಆ ಗುಂಪುಗಳು ಯಾರು, ಅವು ಯಾಕೆ ನಿಂತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಸಹ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾಗೆ ಒಂದು ಕಾರಣ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಫಾಲ್ಸ್ ಟೆರರ್ ಕೇಸ್ಗಳು. ಆ ಫಾಲ್ಸ್ ಟೆರರ್ ಕೇಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಸಹ ನಾವು ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಜಾಂಶ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಆಚೆ ತರಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಒಂದು ಸಾಮಾಜಿಕ ಒಂದು ಒಕ್ಕೂಟಗಳನ್ನ ಕಟ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾನ ಎದುರಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾನ ಎದುರಿಸಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾನೂನು ಸಹ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಈಗ ಜೂಗಳ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಇರೋ ದ್ವೇಷ ತಡೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾನೂನುಗಳಿದಾವೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಮ್ಮ ದಲಿತ ಸಮುದಾಯ, ಆದಿವಾಸಿ ಸಮುದಾಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರೋ ದ್ವೇಷಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾನೂನುಗಳಿದಾವೆ. ಅದೇ ತರ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಸಮುದಾಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರೋ ದ್ವೇಷಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಕಾನೂನು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಕೊನೆದಾಗ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನಂದ್ರೆ ಇಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷಗಳ ಒಂದು ಏನು ದಲಿತರನ್ನ ಆಚೆ ಇಟ್ಟಿದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಈ ಅವರ್ಣಗಳು ಮಾಡಿದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನು ಈಗ ಅವರ್ಣ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊರಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನ ಅಸ್ಪೃಶ್ಯರು ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಹೊರಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ತಡಿಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವ್ರ ಮಾತನ್ನ ಮುಗಿಸಿದ್ರು.
Thanks, Vinay, for the translation. Our next speaker is Heba, PhD scholar from JNU. And I'll draw some connections from what Suhail also spoke about and say that basically we saw
Yeah. Am I audible? I've unmuted myself. So can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible. Yes, you're audible. I'll just speak a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So for Heba specifically, I'd like her to speak on in the sense that we saw since 2019, December 2019, how students were actually at the forefront of the movement and the protests against CAA. And additionally, we saw that two minority institutions and how brutally they were attacked by the state. If you could also speak a little bit on that. Specifically minority institutions such as Jamia and AMU, which were attacked. Additionally, from what Suhail also said, that how there is this kind of propaganda to say that Muslims are inherently violent. We saw in a lot of coverage that the protests, a lot of media coverage that was done on the protests, this kind of narrative regarding the students was also being propagated. Even today, it is being propagated that, you know, these students were not exactly without arms, they had arms and they were attacking the police. This kind of propaganda the state is promoting even now. Another additional thing what we are seeing since the last few months, that a lot of the students who were active then or are taking to social media to speak now are being put under draconian terror laws of India. So if you could speak a little bit on that as well. Yeah, over to you, Heba.
Am I audible? Can
Yeah,
you
you're audible.
Okay. Yeah. So good evening to all my listeners, and thank you very much for this invitation. I'm glad that we are able to continue some kind of protest meetings and protest gatherings despite this seemingly never-ending lockdown. So I'll touch upon a few points about how Islamophobia is linked with the present political events which are happening, which are unfolding in India, and with specific reference, of course, to the CAA legislation and to the protests which follow the CAA, as well as the brutal police crackdown and the killings which have happened in the wake of the CAA. And so while speaking about all of this, while speaking about all these topics, I'll touch upon how each of these is connected to Islamophobia, because often we lose perspective of what Islamophobia is, because we don't always speak about how political events are connected. Political events are connected to Islamophobia, because the political rhetoric which emerges in progressive circles is that events are anti-secular, or they are anti-democratic, or they are, they are against the idea of India, etc. But we are unable to connect political events which are happening, especially vis-a-vis Muslims, with a sudden rise in Islamophobia as a phenomenon in India. So I'll begin, as Eamon suggested, with talking about the CAA and what it means to be Muslim in India. How is CAA connected with the Muslim identity in India as a whole? So to speak on that in particular, I would like to just briefly give you a context on partition, because while discussing the CAA in Parliament, Amit Shah had given a speech in which he said that if partition had not happened, then the CAA would not have been necessary. अगर partition नहीं होता, तो CAA की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती. If partition would not have happened, then CAA would not have been included in the BJP manifesto of India. Now, why did he make this statement, and what is the connection with partition and CAA? So, to cut a long story short, partition resulted in a Muslim denominational homeland, right? Partition resulted in Pakistan. And the moment Pakistan was created, all the Muslims in India became suspect citizens. So they became citizens whose Indianness is always under doubt. They became citizens who cannot readily be called Indian. And therefore, you have an essay, which I would request all listeners to read. It's a good essay by Ganendra Pandey called "Can a Muslim Be an Indian?" And it has a very good historical perspective on how Muslims, the Indianness of Muslims, the Indian belongingness, and therefore the citizenship of Muslims in India has always been under question. So that is to put it very briefly, that is the gist of what resulted in a 70-year-long post-colonial history of India. It resulted in Muslims being, suspect as Indians, Muslims being suspect as citizens of India. Coming to CAA, so 1947 to 2019 is a long journey, but the theme of Muslims being termed as un-Indian, that theme continues. And so the CAA claims that, so this is what the CAA promises, that Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Parsis, Buddhists, Jains, these 6 minority communities. Please notice that Hindus are also included in this list of minority communities. So Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Parsis, Buddhists, and Jains. These people belonging to these six religious communities, if they have entered the Indian nation state, the Indian territory, before or after, on or before 31st December 2014, they will be granted Indian citizenship. And the condition being that they should have entered India from either Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Afghanistan. Now, the interesting situation of here, and this is where the link with Islamophobia then arises, is that why were these 3 countries chosen as target states for minorities? Why were these 3 states declared to be minority unfriendly, and therefore India should give them, sanctuary space? India should give them a safe space from supposed persecution. Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, all 3 are supposedly Islamic countries. They are identified as Muslim majority nations, and therefore the BJP in India wants to portray them as countries in which non-Muslim minorities, Muslim majority, and therefore non-Muslim minorities. So these three countries are countries in which non-Muslim minorities are not safe, and therefore India should be given, India should be declared as a safe space for minorities, for these six religious communities, six religious minority communities from these three states. Now, this is a very clever game that the BJP is playing. The BJP knows that it does not have a good record on minority rights. The BJP knows that it has always had, it has always faced accusations of being unfair to minorities, of practicing minorities discrimination, etc. And the BJP, in fact, has always tried to insinuate that Muslims do not deserve minority status, that Muslims are not, in fact, a minority of India. And therefore, in order to appropriate this whole rhetoric of minority protection, in order to, twist the whole minority protection rhetoric at its very core, and to then claim to be pro-minority in a certain way. That is exactly what the CAA tries to do. The CAA tries to say that, oh no, we are going to give minority protection to Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Parsis, Buddhists, and Jains. So that is what the CAA tries to do. The CAA tries to say that certain minority communities will be given protection in India. But at the risk of what? And this is the other. If step one of Islamophobia was portraying Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan as havens of anti-minority discrimination, step two of CAA and Islamophobia is that the moment you declare only six religious minority communities as deserving of Indian citizenship, the question then raises, what happens to the Muslims? What happens to the status of Indian Muslims whose citizenship may be declared as doubtful, who may be declared to be un-Indians? And this is step two of Islamophobia and CAA, for which I would like to request my listeners to bear a little with me so that I can give a little bit of perspective from Assam, because the entire drama of NRC and CAA has begun in Assam. So the demand of a national register of citizens which can authenticate the names of genuine Indian citizens, this NRC demand began in Assam. Now, the CAA and NRC is linked because once all genuine, authentic Indian citizens have been included in NRC, this is what the BJP claims, that those names of people who are Indians, who deserve Indian citizenship, but have been excluded from NRC because of the various bureaucratic measures of NRC. If there are some names which have been excluded from NRC, they will be assured of Indian citizenship. But again, please remember that not everybody will be included in the ambit of CAA. Only Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Parsis, Buddhists, and Jains. So then again, this entire project of the Assam NRC raised very serious doubts about what is going to happen to those Muslims who were excluded from NRC. And as we know, they were rounded up in detention centers. Mind you, it was not just Muslims who were rounded up in detention centers, because the detention centers was targeted to Bangladeshis as a whole, to Bengali-speaking people. The Bengali-speaking people can be both Hindu and Muslim. But here is the extremely nasty game which BJP is playing. So there was one Assam minister called Himanta Biswa Sarma who made a claim, who made this statement in a press conference, that once the CAA is passed, no person of a non-Muslim faith will be sent to detention camps, and detention camps are only for illegal foreigners. Another BJP chief from Assam, Ranjit Kumar Das, he said that there should be a nationwide NRC, and therefore no Hindu name will be excluded from the list of NRC. So this is what, basically, I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is basically writing an exhaustive list of names. How is that even possible? The Indian state, the Indian nation state is not a school. It's not a college that you can, without mistakes, prepare an exhaustive list of names, namely a register, and authenticate it for every individual citizen. It's not possible. It's not humanly possible. It's not possible. I mean, let's keep aside the fact that it's unethical and it's immoral to declare citizens as lawful citizens. Even by the sheer bureaucratic logic, it's not possible to achieve a bureaucratic accuracy which lists all names on the NRC. And therefore this project is flawed even by its very logic itself. And therefore, when the NRC, which was a demand of the BJP and Assam, and also of of the Assam movement, when the NRC was prepared, they didn't expect that many non-Muslim names will be excluded from NRC. And that is what a very nasty game of nationalism is. The Indian nation, which portrays itself to be the Hindu nation, did not expect that Hindu names will be excluded from NRC. But that is what happened. The Indian nation state did not expect that Hindus will land up in detention centers in Assam, but that is what happened. And therefore, the promise of CAA enters. That okay, if Hindu names have been excluded, don't worry. By the promise of CAA, all Hindus whose citizenship has become doubtful, they will be assured of citizenship. But what about Muslims? What about Muslims whose names have been left off? What about Muslims who are rotting in detention centers? What about Muslims who don't deserve the trauma of being excluded from the NRC, who don't deserve the trauma of having to prove their citizenship time and time and time again? And there were so many cases of Muslims committed suicide out of the sheer horror of being left off. And what is excluded from? What does this mean? If you are excluded from NRC and CAA, what does it mean? You will not be given the right to vote. Your land can be taken away. You will not be granted the basic security of existence. The state can round you up, put you in, ask you to prove your citizenship in front of the foreigner tribunals. The foreigner tribunals may not listen to your case, and you may be put in detention centers where you may die. That is the sheer brutality of CAA, and that is the. So you see how CAA basically tries to demarcate Muslim identity and pinpoint the Muslim identity as un-Indian. And that is where the Islamophobia of the CAA comes in. That is where the Islamophobia of the Indian nation state comes in. Because let's face it, the CAA is it's a project of determining who an Indian is, not just as an abstract idea. No, but hello, is everything okay?
Yeah. Can you have 5 to 6 more minutes?
Okay, sure, no problem.
Yeah.
So I guess I made myself clear on how CAA basically targets Muslim identity. So it was not a surprise, therefore, when to see that when CAA was passed, it was like a spontaneous movement. It was like a spontaneous protest broke out in Jamia Millia Islamia in Aligarh Muslim University, in protests in places like Shaheen Bagh, in places like in so many, like public places across different cities in India. It was not a surprise because everybody knew that the drama of Indian nation state and the drama of patriotic belonging to the country will be marked on everybody, on every individual. And therefore, everybody came out on the streets to show that we are Muslims and yet we belong to the Indian nation. And this was what, so we often use the phrase, assert your identity, be unapologetic about your Muslim identity. What does this mean? This means that I am making the claim that I am Muslim. I bear a name called Osmani, Imam, Ahmad, Iqbal, etc. I have these Muslim names, but at the same time, nobody can label me as un-Indian. So this is the immediate context of CAA, and this is exactly what the demand was. If you listen to the speeches, and I don't have much time, so I'll just quickly come to the moot point of CAA and the witch hunting of Muslim activists. So if you listen to the speeches of Sharjeel Usmani and Sharjeel Imam, and if you have not heard their speeches, I would request you to, because there is honestly a lot to learn from their speeches. So individuals like Sharjeel Usmani and Sharjeel Imam and Asif Iqbal and Meera Haider and all, Safur Azardar and all these Muslim activists who have been jailed, who have been charged with UAP and all of these draconian acts, there is a new kind of assertiveness which you can find in their speeches. The assertiveness is not just that we belong to the Indian nation and that we demand recognition as rights-bearing citizens of India. No. The demand is also that we be recognized as Muslims. We be recognized as people who belong, to the religion of Islam, We will recognize as people with Muslim names, with Muslim identities, and yet we will speak as people who belong to the Indian state. And therefore, this is a huge challenge to the project of the Indian state itself, and not the CAA. When a Shajil Imam or a Shajil Usmani stands up and protests for his identity, it's not just recognize me as a Muslim. No, it's also, the demand is also that recognize me as a Muslim who belongs to the country of India, who belongs to the state of India, and who will unapologetically claim his place in the nation state of India. And that is what the Indian state cannot stomach. That is what the Indian state finds so irritable that it rounds up it rounds up these Muslim activists and puts them in jail. Because what is, and this is where I will end, what is Islamophobia? At the heart of it, Islamophobia is nothing but refusing political expression to Muslim subject positions. I'll repeat that, refusing political expression to Muslim subject positions. So you will not let a Shajil Imam or a Shajil Usmani or an Asif Iqbal, etc., because they are Muslims with Muslim subject positions. You will not let them express themselves politically. And if they do that, you put them in jail. So that is the connection basically. I've tried to put a lot of things in as few words as possible. So basically that is the connection between CAA and Islamophobia. Thank you.
I'll request Vinay to do a quick translation, and I'm requesting our participants to send questions to Hiba and Suhail on our chat, and we will take it towards the end. Vinay.
ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು ಹೇಮನ್ ಅವರೇ ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೇಬಾ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಹೇಬಾ ಅವ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದನ್ನ ಸಂಕ್ಷಿಪ್ತವಾಗಿ ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ನಾನು. ಹೇಬಾ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ನಾವು ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾಗೂ ಮತ್ತೆ ರಾಜಕೀಯವಾಗಿ ನಡೀತಿರೋ ಘಟನೆಗಳಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಲಿಂಕ್ ನ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೋರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಸುಮಾರು ಸತಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷ ಏನ್ ನಡೀತಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಅದಕ್ಕೂ ಮತ್ತೆ ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಘಟನೆಗಳಿಗೂ ನಾವು ಲಿಂಕ್ ನೋಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಉದಾಹರಣೆ CAA. ನೀವು CAA ನೋಡಿದ್ರು ಸಹ CAA ಬಂದು ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಯ್ತು. CAA ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸಂಘ ಪರಿವಾರದವರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷನ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಮೋದಿ ಅವರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಪೀಚ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಪಾರ್ಟಿಷನ್ ಆಗದೆ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ರೆ CAA ಬೇಕಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ. ಸಾರಿ, ಮೋದಿ ಅವರಲ್ಲ, ಅಮಿತ್ ಶಾ ಅವರು ಸದನದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಇವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ಪಾರ್ಟಿಷನ್ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಪಾಕಿಸ್ತಾನ ಯಾವಾಗ ಆಯ್ತು, ಭಾರತ ಪಾಕಿಸ್ತಾನ ಅಂತ ಯಾವಾಗ ವಿಭಜನೆ ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಆಗಿಂದ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಸಮುದಾಯದವ್ರಿಗೆ ನೀವು ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಭಾರತೀಯರ, ನೀವು ಭಾರತಕ್ಕೆ ಸೇರಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅಂತ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಸಂಶಯಾಸ್ಪದವಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಲಾಗ್ತಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಅದು ಈಗ ಮಾಡಿರೋದಲ್ಲ, ಆಗಿಂದ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿರೋದು. ಈಗ CAA ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ CAA ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿರೋ ಹಾಗೆ CAA ನಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಹಿಂದೂ, ಕ್ರಿಶ್ಚಿಯನ್, ಪಾರ್ಸಿ, ಬುದ್ಧಿಸ್ಟ್, ಸಿಖ್ ಈ ಸಮುದಾಯಗಳು ಮಾತ್ರ ತಗೊಂಡು ಒಳಗಡೆ ಬಿಟ್ರು. ಅದನ್ನ ಬರೀ ಪಾಕಿಸ್ತಾನ್, ಅಫ್ಘಾನಿಸ್ತಾನ್, ಬಾಂಗ್ಲಾದೇಶ್ ಈ 3 ದೇಶಗಳ ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರನ್ನ ಮಾತ್ರ ಬಿಟ್ರು. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹೆಬಾ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ಈ 3 ದೇಶಗಳು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಮೆಜಾರಿಟಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಮೆಜಾರಿಟಿ ಆದ ಈ ದೇಶಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರನ್ನ ಸರಿಯಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಪಿಕ್ಚರ್, ಒಂದು ಚಿತ್ರ ಮಾಡಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಆಗಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ದೇಶಗಳು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಮೆಜಾರಿಟಿ ಆಗಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರನ್ನ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಾವು BJP ಅವರು ನಾವು ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರನ್ನ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂತೀವಿ, ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಾಗತಿಸ್ತಿದ್ದೀವಿ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವರು ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರು ದೊಡ್ಡವರು ಅನ್ನೋ ತರ ನೋಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರನ್ನ ಪ್ರೊಟೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋ ತರ ಇದಾರೆ ನೋಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಮೆಜಾರಿಟಿ ಇರೋ ದೇಶಗಳು ಅಲ್ಪಸಂಖ್ಯಾತರ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಚಿತ್ರೀಕರಣ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅಸ್ಸಾಮಲ್ಲೂ ಸಹ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ NRC ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಲವಾರು ಜನ ಡಿಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಡ್ಲಾಯ್ತು. ಅವರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರಾಗಿದ್ರು, ಹಿಂದೂಗಳಾಗಿದ್ರು, ಎಲ್ಲಾದವರು ಆಗಿದ್ರು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹೋದಾಗ, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹೋದಾಗ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ತುಂಬಾ ಸಂಶಯಾಸ್ಪದವಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು, ಹಿಂದೂಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನ ಸಂಶಯಾಸ್ಪದವಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಅನಿಸ್ತು, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಆಗಿರೋ ಒಂದು ಮಾನಸಿಕ ಹಿಂಸೆ ಯಾವ ತರ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಗಮನಿಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವರು ಕೊನೆದಾಗಿ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ದ್ವೇಷ ಯಾಕೆ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ನೋಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ, ಈ CAA ಆದಾಗ ಹಲವಾರು ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಗಳನ್ನ ಅರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು, ಹಲವಾರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳನ್ನ, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಹೋರಾಟಗಾರರನ್ನ ಅರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಈ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ ಅಟೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿರೋರು ಶರ್ಜಿಲ್ ಉಸ್ಮಾನಿ, ಶರ್ಜಿಲ್ ಇಮಾಮ್, ಆಸಿಫ್ ಇಕ್ಬಾಲ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಮೀರನ್ ಹೈದರ್ ಇವ್ರ ಸ್ಪೀಚ್ ಗಳನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ನೀವು ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಇವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಿರೋದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ನಾವು ಭಾರತೀಯರು ಹಾಗೂ ನಾವು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು, ನಾವು ಭಾರತೀಯ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವರೊಂದು ಧೈರ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಭಾರತದ ಒಂದು ವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಗೆ ಪ್ರಭುತ್ವಕ್ಕೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಸಹಿಸ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹಾಕ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಅವ್ರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಅಂತ ತೋರ್ಸ್ಕೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆದರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರು, ಆದ್ರೆ ಈಗ ನಾವು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಹೌದು, ನಾವು ಭಾರತೀಯರು ಹೌದು ಅಂತ ತುಂಬಾ ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ಸಹಿಸ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹಾಕ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದು ಈಗ ನಡೀತಿರೋದು. ಆ ಒಂದು ಅವರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಐಡೆಂಟಿಟಿನ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸ್ತಿದಾರಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನ ಸಹಿಸ್ಕೊಳಕ್ ಆಗದೆ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಹಾಕ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಒಂದು ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಸಹ ಇದಾಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವ್ರ ಮಾತನ್ನ ಮುಗಿಸಿದ್ರು. ಏಮನ್ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ವಾಪಸ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟು.
Thanks, Vinay. I'll move on to our last speaker, Advocate Clifton. I have some questions for Clifton regarding also drawing from Suhail and what he spoke. I would like Clifton to also speak a little bit on how Muslims are continuously seen as a threat in India, and how this notion of being seen as a threat, how this kind of leads to Muslims being incarcerated under very specific terror laws in India. Secondly, I would also like to ask him in the sense that what does he think that how this kind of what Suhail was mentioning, how this kind of popular conception that propaganda that the BJP and the right wing has created is that Muslims are traitors, and how identifying a certain population as traitors, what kind of legal implications does it usually have for the Muslim population in India? The last thing I would also like Advocate Clifton to touch on would be what also Suhail pointed out, as in a way to encounter Islamophobia would also be to look at a specific law in terms of how he gave the example of SCST Atrocities Act, he gave the example of anti-Semitism laws. Through his work, does Advocate Clifton also think that such a law will help counter Islamophobia in India? Those would be some of the points he can touch on. Clifton, over to you. You have 15 minutes.
Hello. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Before I speak, actually, one thing that Suhail said, I think, was extremely disturbing. The question he posed was, why do they hate us so much? Why do they hate Muslims so much? And it's something that's been on my mind for quite some time now. You know, how does one carry that burden? How does one live with that kind of hatred? I think, actually, I thought I'm going to start, by the way. I remember when I was doing my engineering, and I was in college, so in my first semester, one of the first classes, in fact, so the teacher was taking attendance, and then he called the usual names, and then he said, Clifton, or something like that, and he couldn't pronounce me. He said, what is this? Why don't you have an Indian name? It was, I just took it as a joke at that point, but I think that kind of fades into any kind of significance, given the kind of onslaught that the Muslim community is facing, not just in India, but across the world. Of course, I also pay tribute to the heroic struggles that a lot of youth, especially Muslim youth, are taking up across the country. They really inspire, and in a way, I would say that they actually enable this conversation that we're having today. Before talking about Islamophobia, I'd also like to say, I think historically, if one really takes a little bit of a theological kind of a view on this, communities have been facing hatred, discrimination, atrocities, and unimaginable kind of violence through society. And just to, if you were to look at the entire notion of the rights of the African American community in the United States, as an example, you've gone through an entire phase of slavery. You went through the Civil War. You went through the Jim Crow laws. You then went through an entire almost 50, 60 years of continuous lynchings of African Americans across the country. You had the inspirational stories of people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and of course Rosa Parks, in a sense, who set off in more ways than one the civil rights movement. You also have the Supreme Court intervention in the form of Brown versus Board, the Civil Rights Act. But today, what we have before us are the heroic struggles of the African American communities in the United States in the lakhs, taking to the streets, condemning the killings of George Floyd. This is an oppression that has continued over the centuries. If you were to look at even Europe for that instance, in fact, I think Sohail also spoke about anti-Semitism. And if you look at the manner in which Jews were treated in Europe, continue to be treated in some countries even now. We go back and look at the kind of genocide that the Jews faced at the hands of Nazi Germany. That is again an history that is there, where you have a community being targeted for being a particular community. In India, of course, we have the structural inequalities, discriminations, and atrocities on the Dalit community, and that continues even to this date. So, in the face of all of this, we now at a juncture where a Muslim community, anyone belonging by virtue of being born in that community, is being made to ask this question of themselves: why do they hate me so much? Why is it that I'm such a big problem to them? I may be a poor cobbler. I may be a domestic worker. I may be someone who's just a small little student who likes to bunk classes, probably just go for a movie, have a cigarette, probably have a drink. But I'm hated only because I belong to this Muslim community. And I think we're talking of it in the context of Islamophobia today. Of course, that is a term that is of much recent currency, maybe 20, 25 years or so. I'm not going to get into the definitional problem of Islamophobia, which actually I intended to do. I'm going to sail with what Sohail kind of gave us. I mean, I do have certain differences with that. For instance, I would say that we cannot equate caste oppression with what's happening with the Muslim community today, because caste oppression, caste hierarchies are religiously ordained. It's religiously sanctioned. It's something, you're doing the right thing, and to be in that place of subjugation is the right thing for you to do. So I think that's a very complicated kind of a question. So I really don't want to get into that. But I would like to, sound off one caution over here. Given the kind of history of communal relations, of communal harmony, and of course communal discord, especially of our country, I'm not going to talk of any other country. I would say that we should be a little wary of putting everything into this one definition of Islamophobia, because there are a lot of prejudices people may have. I mean, they may not hate somebody, but they may have a prejudice about somebody. They may have certain biases about somebody. They may have certain misconceptions about somebody, and there's a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of heartburn that may be caused by that as well. Collapsing all of that into Islamophobia, I would feel, is something that doesn't help us, because I think one of the first speaker, when he said, the first problem would be to define what the problem is. So I think while defining, we need to be a little cautious about this. I think when we look at, if you're trying to understand Islamophobia from the Indian context, we really cannot escape that the Hindu Rashtra project is something that has been on for 100 years. There's a general myth. I mean, that communal, that these are antagonistic communities for centuries, as it were, which of course is not true. You had one king fighting another king. You had one Muslim king fighting another Hindu king. A Muslim king fighting a Muslim king. You had a Hindu king allying with a Muslim king. You had a Muslim king allying with a Muslim with a Hindu emperor, so on and so forth. I mean, that's something that we all are aware of. But if we are to look at in terms of communities having a certain problem with another community vis-a-vis by virtue of where of the identity markers, as Sohail was trying to say, then we see, if you look at communal riots being that kind of, communal violence being an expression of that is something that is really far more recent. I mean, it's something during the British times, of course, was manufactured by the British, as it were. But I think if we were to understand, if we are not going to look at the kind of the political project of the RSS, the Sangh Parivar, which they have implemented with great dedication over the last 100 years, brought us to this juncture, I think we'd be missing a point over here. And I'd like to say, because the ideological foundation for what we face today was laid 100 years ago. It's not something that came with 9/11. It's something that definitely predates it way before that. And it's, I spoke about what happened in Nazi Germany. The interesting thing about Nazi Germany is that Hitler and the Nazis influenced Golwalkar. But who were Hitler and the Nazis influenced by? Hitler and the Nazis were influenced by the by the racial segregation laws of the United States. So there's such a connection, that one really finds over here. If we were to go back to understanding the Hindu Rashtra project, Golwalkar had this to say in his 1939 booklet called "We Are Our Nation Were Defined." He says that to keep up the purity of the race and its culture, Germany shocked the world by purging the country of the Semitic races, the Jews. Race pride at its highest has been manifested here. Germany has also showed how well nigh impossible it is for races and cultures having differences going to the root to be assimilated into one united whole, a good lesson for us in Hindustan to learn and profit by. So this idea of the other, this idea of a particular community that cannot intrinsically cannot assimilate itself with the what is the natural culture of a particular land is something that was sowed. Those seeds were sowed at that point itself. In fact, Savarkar spoke about the two-nation theory way before Jinnah actually spoke about it. In fact, in his 1923, in his booklet called Hindutva, he actually talks about the two-nation theory over there. Of course, years later, after Hindu Mahasabha was formed, I think 1933 or 34, after Hindu Mahasabha was formed, he actually had this to say in the 19th session. He says, there are two antagonistic nations living side by side in India. India cannot be assumed to be a homogeneous nation, but on the contrary, there are two nations in the main, the Hindus and the Muslims in India. So the setting up of the Muslim as the other, that is a political project that began a long time ago. And that is something, what is it premised on? It's premised on the understanding that Muslims basically are the Mughals, and these are the invaders. They came here, they looted us, they destroyed our temples. We already know what's happening. Ram Mandir is going to be built where Babri Masjid once stood. There is, I don't know if this is fake news, so please, one of the politicians in Delhi has now tweeted that Taj Mahal apparently was a Kapil Mishra. Yeah, thanks, Aman. That Taj Mahal was a temple once. So you have there's an entire logic that has been constructed for all these years. So the idea is that religious minorities like Muslims and Christians, actually it could be just a thing. Muslim doesn't necessarily mean somebody who believes in Islam. It very well could be somebody who's just has a Muslim name and doesn't believe in any religion, or it could be someone like me who doesn't believe in Christianity at all. But the idea is that religious minorities like Muslims and Christians can never be loyal to the nation. Again, that is grounded in what is said, in what is written in terms of an ideological standpoint. Golwalkar actually says this. The tie of the common holy land has at times proven stronger than the claims of a motherland. Look at the Mohammedans. Mecca to them is a sterner reality than Delhi or Agra. So we see that this is, again, this religious minorities, they can never ever be, they can never ever have that sense of loyalty or belonging to this nation. Of course, the idea of conversion, forcible conversion, is something that we've all heard about. Cultural differences are also highlighted. The other thing, of course, in this, then when you understand this othering project, where does this othering project then lead to? Golwalkar says this about what it means. The non-Hindu peoples in Hindustan must either adopt the Hindu culture and language, must learn to respect and hold in reverence Hindu religion, must entertain no idea but those of the glorification of the Hindu race and culture. That is, they must not only give up their attitude of intolerance and ungratefulness towards this land and its age-long traditions, but must also cultivate the positive attitude of love and devotion instead. And in other words, they must cease to be foreigners or may stay in the country wholly subordinated to the Hindu nation, claiming nothing, deserving no privileges, far less preferential treatment, not even citizenship rights. There is, or at least should be, no other course for them to adopt. We are an old nation, and let us deal as old nations ought to deal with foreign races who have chosen to live in our country. So today, when this entire the notion of terror and terrorism and Islamophobia, etc., invaded the discourse, as it were, there was a very easy marriage that took place between the two. So I think if we were to understand Islamophobia in India, I think this history of it, with merging with this kind of a contemporary discourse that has been created around Islamophobia, to some extent, which could also be said to be a Eurocentric, is something that I think we really need to keep in mind. Having said that, I mean having said that, there are just I've been told to cut, so I'll just try and go to the combating Islamophobia part, which I really had to speak of. I mean, I think, see, like Ayman started off saying that this is a conversation, and I feel that this is a conversation we really need to have. How do you enable a society where somebody doesn't feel that kind of fear just to be something that you didn't choose to be, as it were? I think that is something that we need to think about. Sohail has certain suggestions that he made, so I'm not going to go over that. But there's one thing that I would like to say over here. Our country is at the on the footstep, at the doorstep, as it were, of fascism. So while you have this kind of violence, this kind of the othering of the Muslim community, we also have the age-long traditions of caste and patriarchy and the treatment of Adivasis, so on and so forth. We also have an entire assault on the rights of the working class, as it were, with the dismantling of the entire labor law regime, dismantling of the environmental law regime, dismantling of any regime that protected farmers. So basically, we have a situation now where citizens are going to be citizens without any rights, workers without rights, laborers without rights, peasants without rights, farmers without rights. In this kind of a situation, I would imagine we also need to think of certain kinds of class solidarities, because, like, in one of our unions, one of the problems we had faced, there was a Muslim owner and there were workers. He didn't care about the fact that the workers were Muslim and that he'll protect their employment. He threw them out like he threw out every other worker over there. So how do we build these class solidarities across to actually take on this kind of a threat that faces our nation? I think that's really something that we need to think about. There are certain other points that I have to say, but I think I kind of
It's okay.
oh, Bapre. I think privileges of being Christian. You get 2 minutes. No, so I really want to dwell on that point, because I really think that, society is, this entire, what Sohail was saying about the mind being, what was the word he used? Hacked, the mind being hacked. There's the poison in people's minds, and that's something that, I feel is something we really need to fight. Baba Sahib Ambedkar talks about the notion of associated living, about the act of living together is where you start to develop sense of respect with each other. And today you have two Indias within India. You've had an entire ghettoization, you've had marginalization of certain communities. I feel that we need to go back to the societies. We really need to start through various ways. There's a book that I've been reading on combating Islamophobia in Europe. I'll share that a soft copy with Ayman, and you all can all read it. But I think to some extent it gives us some kind of a roadmap. This is a long, hard road that we have to walk, but we'll have to walk it if we have to prevent any kind of, a furthering of this fascist kind of agenda in this country. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Clifton. Vinay, can you please do a quick translation and we can take questions?
ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಅವರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಸಂಕ್ಷಿಪ್ತವಾಗಿ ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಅವರು ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಒಂದು ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ತುಂಬಾನೇ ಒಂದು ನೋವಾಗಂತ ವಿಷಯ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾವ್ದೋ ಒಂದು ಸಮುದಾಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ದ್ವೇಷ ಇದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ದ್ವೇಷದ ಜೊತೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಅವರು ಬದುಕ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ತುಂಬಾನೇ ಒಂದು ಇದಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ಈ ದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಇವತ್ತು ನಾವು ಈ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಯುವಕರು ಹೋರಾಟ ಮಾಡಿ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಯುವಕರು ಜೈಲ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನಿಜವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಅವ್ರಿಗೊಂದು ಸಲಾಂ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಒಂದ್ ರೀತಿಲಿ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಹೋರಾಟದಿಂದನೇ ಇವತ್ತು ಈ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಅವರು ಐತಿಹಾಸಿಕವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಕೆಲವನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಅಮೆರಿಕಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಆಫ್ರಿಕನ್ ಅಮೆರಿಕನ್ಸ್ ಏನ್ ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಸಮುದಾಯ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಅವ್ರ ಮೇಲೆ ಆಗ್ತಿರೋ ದ್ವೇಷ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಸುಮಾರು ನೂರಾರು ವರ್ಷಗಳಿಂದ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಸ್ಲೇವರಿ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಇತ್ತು. ಸ್ಲೇವರಿ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ನಂತರನೂ ಸಹ ಈ ಒಂದು ಸಿವಿಲ್ ರೈಟ್ಸ್ ಹೋರಾಟ ನಡೀತು. ಮತ್ತು ಅವ್ರ ಮೇಲೂ ಸಹ ಈ ಮಾಬ್ ಲಿಂಚಿಂಗ್ ಏನ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ ಅವ್ರ ಮೇಲೂ ಸಹ ನಡೀತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ನಂತರ ಮಾರ್ಟಿನ್ ಲೂಥರ್ ಕಿಂಗ್ ಅವರು, ರೋಸಾ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಇದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೆಲವು ಸುಪ್ರೀಂ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಇಂದ ಕೆಲವು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಜಡ್ಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಗಳು ಬಂತು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಇವತ್ತು ಈ ಒಂದು ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾರ್ಜ್ ಫ್ಲಾಯ್ಡ್ ಅವರು ಕೊಲೆ ಆಯ್ತು, ಅದರ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಹೋರಾಟಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಯುರೋಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಸಹ ಜೂಗಳ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಏನು ನಡೆಯಿತು ಅದ್ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀವಿ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು, ನಾವು ಐತಿಹಾಸಿಕವಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಜಗತ್ತಲ್ಲಿ ಸಮುದಾಯಗಳ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಈ ದ್ವೇಷದ ಒಂದು ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ನಡೀತಾ ಇದೆ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಆ ಒಂದು ಐತಿಹಾಸಿಕವಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು. ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲೂ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ದಲಿತ ಸಮುದಾಯ ಮೇಲೆ ಏನು ದ್ವೇಷ ನಡೀತಿದೆಯಾ ಅದು ಒಂದು ಐತಿಹಾಸಿಕವಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಸಮುದಾಯದ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರೋ ದ್ವೇಷ, ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅವರು ಒಬ್ರು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿ, ಅವರು ಇಸ್ಲಾಂ ರಿಲಿಜನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಂಬ್ತಾರೋ ಇಲ್ವೋ ಬೇರೆ ವಿಷಯ, ಬಟ್ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ಹೆಸರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಆಗಿದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರೊಂದು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿತ್ವನ ತೋರ್ಸಿದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಒಂದು ದ್ವೇಷ ಇದೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಆ ಒಂದು ಪದ ಒಂದು 20 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಬಂದಿರಬಹುದು, ಆದ್ರೆ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ನೆಲೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿರೋದು ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ 100 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದನೂ ಒಂದು ನೆಲೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದೆ. ಏನು ಗೋಲ್ವಾಲ್ಕರ್, ಸವರ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಮಾಡಿರೋ ಕೆಲಸಗಳು ಈಗ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾಗೆ ಒಂದು ನೆಲೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದೆ. ನಾವು ಗೋಲ್ವಾಲ್ಕರ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಸವರ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದನ್ನ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ, ಅವ್ರು ಬರ್ದಿರೋ ಪುಸ್ತಕಗಳು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದರಲ್ಲೇ ಸಹ ಒಂದು ನೆಲೆ ಇದೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಏನಂದ್ರೆ, ವಾಪಸ್ ಒಂದ್ ನಿಮಿಷ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ಸುಹೇಲ್ ಅವರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರ ಮೇಲೆ ನಡೀತಿರೋ ದ್ವೇಷ ಅಸ್ಪೃಶ್ಯತೆಗೆ ಸಮಾನ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾನು ಒಪ್ಪೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅಸ್ಪೃಶ್ಯತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಧರ್ಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿರೋದು. ನೀವು ಯಾರನ್ನಾದ್ರೂ ಅಸ್ಪೃಶ್ಯರಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಧರ್ಮದಲ್ಲೇ ಆ ರೀತಿ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಅದು ಮತ್ತೆ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ವಾಪಸ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾಗೂ ಮತ್ತೆ ಹಿಂದೂ ರಾಷ್ಟ್ರ ಏನು ಯೋಜನೆಗೂ ಖಂಡಿತವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಲಿಂಕ್ಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಲೇಬೇಕು. ಈ ಹಿಂದೂ ನಾವು ಇತಿಹಾಸ ಗಮನಿಸಿದ್ರೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ರಾಜರು, ಹಿಂದೂ ರಾಜರು ಅವರು ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು, ಅವ್ರ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಇದ್ರು. ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳೇ ಅವ್ರ ಮಧ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಿತ್ತಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರು, ಹಿಂದೂ ರಾಜ್ಯಗಳು ಸಹ ಅವ್ರ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ಕಿತ್ತಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರು. ಬಟ್ ಈ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಹಿಂದೂ ದ್ವೇಷ, ಈಗ ಕೋಮು ಗಲಭೆಗಳು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಅದು ಬ್ರಿಟನ್ ಭಾರತ ದೇಶನ ಆಳ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಒಂದ್ ರೀತಿ ಶುರು ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಅದು ಅವ್ರು ತಯಾರಿಸಿರೋ ಗಲಭೆಗಳಾಗಿರ್ಬೋದು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅದ್ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ದಂಗೆ ಇದು ಬರೀ ಅಮೆರಿಕಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಟ್ವಿನ್ ಟವರ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಅಟ್ಯಾಕ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದು 9/11 ಇಂದ ಶುರು ಆಗಿರೋ ದ್ವೇಷ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಬದಲಿಗೆ ಒಂದು 100 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಶುರು ಆಗಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನಂದ್ರೆ, ಸವರ್ಕರ್ ಅವ್ರು ಮಾತಾಡೋದು ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಜಿನ್ನಾಗಿಂತ ಮುಂಚೆ ಸವರ್ಕರ್ ಅವರೇ ಈ 2 ನೇಷನ್ ಥಿಯರಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಅವ್ರು ಆಗ್ಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ 2 ದೇಶಗಳಿದಾವೆ. ಈ ದೇಶಗಳು ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಇರಕ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಒಂದು ಹಿಂದೂ ದೇಶ, ಒಂದು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ದೇಶ. ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನ ಬೇರೆ, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಸಮುದಾಯದ ಆಚೆ ಅಂತ ಆಗ್ಲಿಂದ ಅವರು ಬರ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಆಗ್ಲಿಂದ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಮೊಘಲರಿಂದ ಬಂದಿರೋದು, ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶನ ಲೂಟಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರನ್ನ ಬೇರೆ ಅಂತ ಆಗ್ಲಿಂದ ಅವರು ಬರ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಗೋಲ್ವಾಲ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಸಹ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಮರು ಈ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಈ ದೇಶದವರಲ್ಲ, ಈ ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ದ್ರೋಹ ಮಾಡೋರು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಇಮೇಜ್ ನ ಸಹ ಗೋಲ್ವಾಲ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಆಗ್ಲಿಂದ ಕಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ಗೋಲ್ವಾಲ್ಕರ್ ಅವ್ರ ಪುಸ್ತಕದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಏನ್ ಹೇಳಿರೋದು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ನಮ್ದು ಒಂದು ತುಂಬಾ ಹಳೆ ದೇಶ, ನಮ್ದು ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಚೀನ ದೇಶ, ಪ್ರಾಚೀನ ಒಂದು ಸಿವಿಲೈಸೇಷನ್ ನಮ್ದು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಪ್ರಾಚೀನ ಸಿವಿಲೈಸೇಷನ್ ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಫಾರಿನರ್ಸ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಫಾರಿನರ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಲಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ, ಬಟ್ ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದ ಸಂಸ್ಕೃತಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ದೇಶದ ಒಂದು ಹಿಂದೂಸಂನ ಅವರು ನಂಬ್ಕೊಂಡಿರ್ಬೇಕು. ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯ ಹಕ್ಕುಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ಬಾರ್ದು, ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಎರಡನೇ ದರ್ಜೆ ನಾಗರಿಕರಾಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅವರು ಗೋಲ್ವಾಲ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಆಗ್ಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ಆಗ್ಲಿಂದ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಇದು ಆಗ್ಲಿಂದ ಬಂದಿರೋದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಎದುರಿಸಬೇಕಾಗಿದೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಎದುರಿಸೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಸುಹೇಲ್ ಅವರು ಸುಮಾರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ನಾನು ಅದನ್ನ ಮತ್ತೆ ಹೇಳಿಕ್ ಹೋಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಏನ್ ಗಮನಿಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕ ಕಾನೂನುಗಳು ತಿದ್ದುಪಡಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ರೈತ ವಿರೋಧಿ ಕಾನೂನುಗಳನ್ನ ಸಹ ತರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಆದಿವಾಸಿಗಳ ವಿರುದ್ಧ ಸಹ ತರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇವತ್ತು ಹಲವಾರು ಸಮುದಾಯಗಳ ಹಕ್ಕುಗಳನ್ನ ಕಿತ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಒಂದು ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವೊಂದು ವರ್ಗದ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಒಗ್ಗಟ್ಟನ್ನ ತರ್ಬೋದಾ? ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಸಾಲಿಡಾರಿಟಿ, ಒಂದು ವರ್ಗದ ಆಧಾರದ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಒಗ್ಗಟ್ಟನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬರಕ್ಕಾಗತ್ತಾ? ಆ ಒಂದು ಒಗ್ಗಟ್ಟನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬರೋದು ತುಂಬಾ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅವರೊಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು, ಒಂದು ಫ್ಯಾಕ್ಟ್ರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಓನರ್ ಇದ್ರು, ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರಿದ್ರು. ಆದ್ರೆ ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಓನರ್ ಇವರು ಕಾರ್ಮಿಕರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೇನು ಪ್ರಿಫರೆನ್ಸ್ ಏನ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿಲ್ಲ ಅಥವಾ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ. ಮಿಕ್ಕಿರೋ ವರ್ಕರ್ಸ್ ತರನೇ ಇವ್ರನ್ನು ಸಹ ತೆಗ್ದಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ರು. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಎದುರ್ಸಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವೊಂದು ವರ್ಗ ಆಧಾರಿತ ಒಂದು ಒಗ್ಗಟ್ಟನ್ನ ಕಟ್ಬೋದ ಅಂತ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಸುಹೇಲ್ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ದಂಗೆ ಮನಸ್ಸುಗಳು ಹ್ಯಾಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ. ಆ ಹ್ಯಾಕ್ ಆಗಿರೋ ಮನಸ್ಸುಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಎದುರಿಸೋದು ಹೇಗೆ? ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಂಬೇಡ್ಕರ್ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು, ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಸೋಸಿಯೇಟೆಡ್ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ ಅಂತಾರೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಬದುಕಿದ್ರೆ, ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಆಕ್ಚುಲಿ ನೆಲೆಸಿದ್ರೆ ಆಗ್ಲೇ ಸಹ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸಮುದಾಯಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ರೆಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟ್ ಕೊಡಕ್ಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ರೀತಿ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಎದುರಿಸಕ್ಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. ಇಸ್ಲಾಮೋಫೋಬಿಯಾ ಎದುರಿಸೋದು ತುಂಬಾ ಒಂದು ಕಷ್ಟವಾದ, ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ನಡೀದೆ, ಆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡದೆ ಬೇರೆ ಯಾವ್ದು ದಾರಿ, ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ಲೇಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಕ್ಲಿಫ್ಟನ್ ಅವರು ಅವ್ರ ಮಾತನ್ನ ಮುಗಿಸಿದ್ರು.
Thanks, Vinay, for the translation. Actually, Suhail our first speaker had to leave because of engagements. So I'll take some of the questions. I'll read out the questions.
It's not working.
Oh, internet is not working. Go just join something else.
I'm sorry, there was some difficulty from our end. Yeah. One question which has come for Suhail is that he'd mentioned that there were internal reasons within the Muslim community that also contribute to the idea of Islamophobia. I'm wondering if Heba, you'd like to take this question if you feel comfortable. You can refuse because that's a question for Suhail, but either way.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. You're audible. Yes.
Internal reasons for within the Muslim community for Islamophobia. I wish I didn't have to answer this question because I don't like the question, but let me just say that
It's okay if you don't wish to.
no,
It's completely fine. It's optional. Since Suhail had to leave, I'm.
So let's take up the issue of one thing which Suhail had mentioned was about the issue of, and one thing which Emin you also had mentioned was about the issue of triple talaq legislation and how triple talaq legislation stemmed from this perspective that Muslims are inherently misogynistic and Muslims are inherently, people who divorce their wives, instantly triple talaq their wives, and whatever be it, these are issues which are inherent to the Muslim community, and Muslims have never claimed to be, holier than thou and the most righteous people in India, and we've never claimed to be very, ultra progressive on every issue, right? We've never claimed to be that. But then, does this justify the Islamophobia which is directed at Muslims? Does it justify the very pinpointed legislation? So triple talaq legislation targeted Muslims as a whole. It incarcerated. I mean to say, it identifies Muslim men as inherently misogynistic and therefore plans to jail them if they are found guilty of triple talaq. Is that justified? I'm not saying that Muslims are without any problems. We never claim to be that. But just ask yourself this: if you are asked to give solidarity to persecuted people, will you hold up a checklist in front of yourself? Okay, they are very feminist. They are very they are vegan. They are feminist. They are socialist. They are this. They are that. Will you hold up a checklist for them and say, okay, only if they satisfy my checklist, only if they tick off all items in the checklist, only then will I resist the Islamophobia which they face? Does that seem fair? Especially in the current dispensation where there is so much intense Islamophobia, which my two fellow panelists also have spoken so eloquently about. Especially in the current political dispensation, is Islamophobia to be justified on any grounds whatsoever? And especially if you say that there are reasons within unique to the Muslim community because of which Islamophobia is encouraged. I'm sorry, but that is just victim blaming. That's all. So, Evan, that's my answer.
Yeah. Thanks for taking that question, Heba. I have there's a question which has come for Clifton. I'll read out the question. The question is that George Floyd gets killed accidentally, and the protests happen worldwide. And we have two. We have Mohammed Faizan who gets beaten in Delhi and killed, and he's filmed while getting beaten up by the police, and the police arrests him, and then he later on dies in custody. And forget any protests or any kind of national uproar regarding that. And we don't even get to know his name. And this person is saying that even I had to look him up. And now my question is that is Muslim community going through some kind of guilt consciousness? And with the hacking of the mind, this anti-Muslim propaganda has also worked on Muslim mind, has it? And are they themselves made to believe that propaganda that Sangh Parivar is carrying? And this person is also saying that please don't think that I am implying this is just a question to Clifton. Yeah, Clifton.
Yeah, thanks. But I think let's remember also that it's not the first. George Floyd that was killed. I mean, the kind of um, targeted violence, systemic violence that the African American community faces at the hands of the police in the United States is well documented. The number of deaths and these we're not talking about numbers of one or two. We're talking of large numbers of African Americans who are killed by the police in the US. But it is something else that happened in terms of George Floyd. It is something that pricked really. It affected people so badly. That entire 9-minute clip of a methodical, a conscious and deliberate killing of him is something that actually I would say that caused the kind of protest that took place over there. And it's true. I mean, the kind of the kind of what's the word to use for that? I mean, if you look at any kind of caste atrocity or atrocities against Muslims as well, including what happened to Faizan, there just seems to be an acceptance of it. It doesn't seem to be something that causes the kind of outrage that it definitely should cause. And I think that's really, it's not just a problem of the Muslim community. I don't think it's a problem just then of the Dalit community. I think it's a problem of all of us. How is it that it's so natural, it's become something that you read in the newspaper, you probably just do some kind of choo about, and then you move on with your lives. I think it reflects extremely badly on the quality of humanity that is there in our society. It reflects very poorly on the kind of democratic beliefs of our society. So really, it's a question that troubles me as well. I mean, somebody is just beaten up and killed. The video circulates, and then you'd have so much of on Twitter. So it's like literally, I mean, really, we want to run away from there sometimes. The kind of hatred that's spewed over there, and then you wonder, why is it that we are not able to mobilize ourselves as a community, or as a society, or as any kind of a person with some humanity left in them to fight it. I think we need to find answers to that. There are no easy answers, and I think in finding the answers to these questions, we probably will find a way forward. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question, but it really troubles me as much. I guess it troubles you.
There's another question, and I'm wondering if Heba, you'd want to take this. Suhail had to leave. It's okay if you don't want to take it. You can directly.
It's okay. I'll take it. Yeah.
I'm just reading the question. It says Islamophobia is equated to attack on Muslimness. Mostly, it is addressed as an attack on identity. Tackle it. The solution which is offered from the speaker is to evolve strategy to deconstruct Islamophobia by giving a positive narrative to Muslimness. However, the problem with this solution is that it maintains status quo within Muslims and leading to objection against positive critique of the religion. Thereby, it hampers the spirit of scientific temper and spirit of inquiry and reform. Would you like to take that?
I don't think I got the question because I think the video lagged. So is it okay if we skip that?
Yeah, all right. Okay, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Clifton would like to answer that. Yeah, so I'll leave it to Clifton.
No, actually, one of the things that I said in the end, I kind of ran out of time. But the attack on the Muslim community and anyone who wears any marker of Islam is because they are from that particular, that is their identity. So the fight back obviously is from that identity, and we are seeing it. I think the anti-CA struggle has shown us, we've seen the kind of courageous protests that have taken place all across the country, including by a lot of Muslim youth who are saying that yes, we are Muslim and we are Indian, and deal with it. And I think that's an absolutely extremely necessary kind of a protest. But like I was saying, I don't think that it can begin and end with that, because there are structural inequalities. There is an entire there is the attack of fascism that we are facing in the country. There, we have to also then try and build solidarities, not just across an identity that really you didn't have a choice with, though it may have become a choice subsequently, but to actually build a solidarity across class, because that in a way then can take this entire battle forward. It can actually talk about all the other issues. It can address the entire inequalities, the kind of wealth inequality especially that we are seeing in a nation. And I think it's also very essential if one keeps in mind the Rajendra Satcher report, which perhaps is the only report that paints a true picture of the Muslim community in India, that completely casts aside this entire myth of Muslim appeasement that the Sangh Parivar likes to bandy about. So those questions also need to be addressed, and that I think cannot only be by an assertion on the basis of an identity. Again, I'm up. It's something that it's a view I hold, but it's something that I'm always ready to debate about. Thanks.
Another question which has come, which is open, it's not specific to Suhail or anyone, is how to address hate in any religious society which is inherently and structurally antagonistic. Eva, would you like to take that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how to address hate in any religious society which is inherently and structurally antagonistic.
Okay. So I think one of the things which would be one of the ways in which structural hatred of Muslims right now, as I see it, is one of the structural ways of implementing Islamophobia is just sheer laws of the state, and the laws of the state and the judicial pronouncements of the state. So, for example, when a Sharjeel Imam or a Sharjeel Ismani is booked under UAPA, a lot of the support which the state derives is just by the sheer Islamophobic rhetoric which flows around. So, the structural Islamophobia over here is buttressed by the level of anti-Muslim hatred, which is, I'll give you with just one very banal everyday example. So you have a lot of these social media live sessions organized by university student organizations, be it AMU or JNU, and just begin one of these live sessions. Just join one of these live sessions, and then you can see all of these bucks and all these Hindutva trolls. They just come and spew such hate speech on all of these videos. So, the structural Islamophobia which therefore exists for students like Sharjeel Ismani and Sharjeel Imam flows right from not just the UAPA legislation as a whole, but down to the very minute and banal comments which flow, which are made for Sharjeel Usmani and Sharjeel Imam. I'm not saying that contradicting and refuting these Islamophobic tendencies is easy at all. I think one way of addressing this very ingrained Islamophobia is therefore, the anti-Muslim hatred which people have, which is buttressed by this legislation of the state, is therefore to recognize the deep-seated nature of this malaise. Because unless and until we recognize how deep Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred exists actually, I don't think we can even approach the idea of solving it, or we can even approach the idea of how to deal with it. Because first of all, we don't even know how deep-seated these problems are. Safura Zargar, when she was in jail, the kind of atrocious comments which were made on her. And this is one woman who was pregnant and she was in jail. I don't know who else deserves more solidarity than such a person. But she was a protester, displaying unimaginable courage. And then she was jailed, which is, so many levels of patheticness, so many levels of anti-Muslim hatred which Safura Zargar had to face, and then the kind of atrocious comments which Safura Zargar had to face when she was in jail. The kind of comments which were made about her, which are so ingrained in a rape culture which is so ingrained in the misogyny of Muslim women. So I don't want to be too ambitious about how to solve this problem. First of all, I want to even explore this problem for myself. This problem with a capital P. I want to explore the many layers of Islamophobia which exist for Muslim students like Safura or Sharjeel, and I want to first understand it and then to explain it to everyone, explain it to explain it to people and how, because the question mentioned antagonism. So there are many layers of antagonism which exist for Muslim students like Shajil Imam or Shajil Usmani or Asif Iqbal, or and I mean just now we've received the news that Professor Hani Babu has also been arrested. I mean, so just as we are addressing one kind of problem, I mean there are more and more names which are being just added, more and more students and professors who are just being arrested. You just name it and they're being arrested. So the first thing that we have to do is to first understand the many layers of antagonism which exists for Muslims. So thanks. That's my answer.
Thanks, Hiba. There's another question, and I was wondering if Clifton could take that. The question is, which government institution should a Muslim depend upon to be sure of getting justice? And additional to that, actually, I had a question for Clifton, which did not get addressed in his talk, was that our first speaker, Sohail, suggested that be a specific law to tackle Islamophobia in India, and gave the example of anti-Semitism law in Europe, and also gave the example of SC/ST Atrocities Act. Should there be a specific law to protect rights of minority communities in India, and what does he think of that? Yeah, 2 questions.
Yeah, I mean, which I don't know. I mean, justice dependent on any government institution. I don't know if really we've reached that stage of a democracy, at least in our country. But of course, various institutions of democracy, we knock on them. But if you look at the kind of situation that we are in today, especially the media, the kind of enabling and propagating role that the media is playing of Islamophobia at this point in time, there's really no hope over there. We have a RSS government and in the country and in most states, and in other states we have a Congress government that's waiting to become an RSS government. So really, I don't know, if those doors will be something that we want to knock. We, of course, we do have the police, and really, I don't think we have much faith in that. The judiciary is there, and you do get some good orders. For instance, the order of the Madras High Court on the Tablighi case, where they were denied a visa, etc. Very, very decent, very sensitively written kind of judgment. But then we also have a lot of we also have convicted lynchers who have been let out on bail, only to be garlanded by central ministers. So I think judiciary also is something that we need to think about. And moreover, I don't think any rights that are secured through the courts can ever be secure. I feel that and again it goes to the point that I was making that time. I feel that unless we're able to fight Islamophobia or this communal hatred, this otherness, this difference, unless we're able to fight it in the battle in the minds of people, and we are able to win that, I don't think it's going to be secure. Because if you even look back, even though segregation laws were struck down in the early 50s, or maybe in the 50s, and there was a law that came, it is only the movement, the civil rights movement, and the struggle of the Black Panthers, the struggle of the Nation of Islam, that actually enabled any kind of an empowerment or any kind of a snatching of rights by the communities. So I feel combating Islamophobia, really there are several levels at which we have to work. There are several notions that have to be deconstructed, several that have to be dispelled. And unless we do that, I don't think that we're really going to achieve anything from the various institutions. I know maybe a little out of context, but this one poem that Soyama Manzoor Khan had written, I think this was in 2017 in Great Britain, in London. A fantastic poem. I mean, it's one of the lines in the poem is this: "If you need me to prove my humanity, I'm not the one who's not human." And I think we are at that point where we have to stand up and say that we are really not the ones who need to keep running from pillar to post. We have to start standing up and asserting in that sense.
Yeah, I think that was our last question for today. And if Heba or Clifton would like to give any closing remarks? No. Heba, would you like to give any closing remarks? And we'll just end at that because
no, I don't think so. I mean, I think I've spoken enough. So yeah,
okay.
thank you
Yeah,
for
okay.
having me.
Thank you so much, and thanks a lot for everybody to join and engage. And this is a conversation that we have to keep engaging with. And we also have shared the link, the YouTube link to this talk, and we will hopefully disseminate this widely and also continue our conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. No, thank you. I also